Welcome to the Birth Abroad podcast. My name is Megan Jennings, and I'm honored to host mothers who have come here to share their overseas childbirth stories. From fertility journeys to postpartum and beyond, this podcast is meant to hold space for women all over the world to share their unique experiences with the challenge of becoming a mother away from one's home country. Let's get in today's episode. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the show. Today I'm going to be interviewing Jessica Howard. She and I actually met on Instagram. Her handle is at room4gelato if you want to go check it out. She's going to be telling us her story of pregnancy and birth from the perspective of an American in Germany. And her story is one in which both her and her spouse were Americans, so they had no local connection to Germany. So she has some interesting perspectives and some really good advice to share. So without giving any more else away, I will let Jessica take it away from here. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the Birth Abroad podcast. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to sit down and share your story with us.
Well, hi. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, where you currently live, where you were living abroad, etc.?
Sure. So, yes, hi, I'm Jessica. I live currently in Novi, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit. And I recently moved back in February of 2019 after living in Stuttgart, Germany for 3 years.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's been quite a transition.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially if, 3 years sounds like a lot of time, but yet it's not. So it's a lot of flip-flopping.
Yep.
So before we get started with pregnancy, birth in Germany, let's take a few steps back. And how did you even find yourself out there in the first place?
Yeah, so my husband works in the automotive industry, hence why we're in Detroit. Neither of us are from here, but he was working for an automotive supplier here for a couple years after college graduation, and part of the climbing the corporate ladder involves an international assignment. So one day, it was October of 2015, he just came home and was like, "So do you want to move to Germany?" And I was like, sure. I mean, we had talked about it. It was definitely something we wanted to do. At that time we were in our late 20s. We were saving for a house, but we didn't have a house, and we had a small dog, and we were like, yeah, let's do it for 3 years. That'll be a fun adventure. We'll just travel around, and so he interviewed and got the position, and the next January of 2016, a sea container came to our little apartment and packed up our stuff, and off we went.
That was a short turnaround from October to January, huh?
Yeah, it really is. And we didn't tell anybody until it was like a signed, done deal. So to our family and friends, we didn't tell anybody until Thanksgiving.
How were your parents about that?
Well, let's just say that the first Paris terrorist attack happened in November,
right.
2015. So my mom was not too excited about that, as any mother would be, concerned about the safety. And she was like, "I don't think you should do this." And so they wouldn't send us over there if there was a terrorist threat.
Right.
But,
So the sea container arrived, and then off you went.
Off we went, and I ended up, my husband had to go 2 weeks early than I did. So I flew, one-way ticket from Detroit to Stuttgart with our 7-pound cockapoo with me, which was a lot harder than it sounds, actually, because she was with me and under the seat in front of me, but that's a whole other story, traveling with a dog, because there's all this paperwork, and I had to drive 2 hours to get a stamp from the USDA and all this paperwork, and then we landed in Germany and no one looked at it.
That's annoying.
No one cared.
What was the transition like when you moved there?
So we moved, we didn't have a place to live. We were living in hotels. We lived in a hotel from February to April. And Germany is a very dog-friendly country, but we actually had a hard time getting an apartment that allowed dogs, which was very surprising because like, there are dogs everywhere. But we ended up finding an apartment that worked out. You know, it certainly didn't have everything on our wish list, but it turned out great. Um, and once we finally moved in, after 2 months in a hotel, you know, one room, two people, and a dog, and my husband was going to work all day and I wasn't working. So the transition to full time working in marketing person to stay at home dog mom in a country where you don't know the language or a soul besides your husband was trying, to say the least. So
So was your plan to, because I know one thing about Germany, that when you move there, and I don't know if it's the same with like work contracts, but they really require new residents to know the language. Was that true in your case?
not in our case because all of my legal documents were attached to my husband. So since he was on a work visa, there was no language requirement for us. If, for example, after the 3 years, we were like, we love it here, we're going to stay, then we would need a local permanent resident visa. And that's when we would have to take a language test.
Okay.
And pass. So we did learn the language. We both had private tutors, which the company paid for, which was necessary and very, very nice. We were lucky to have that because, yeah, everybody speaks English, but there are people, you know, like the dry cleaner or some people working at the grocery store, or you go to a small town and there's one lady working at the bakery and they don't speak English, you know. And of course, you know, it's a little rude to live in a country and not even attempt to speak their language.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
And so we made the effort the best we could.
Well, it's awesome that the company paid for those lessons.
Yes, that was very, very nice, especially for both of us.
So was it your intention to start your family while on this abroad assignment?
We had talked about it, and you know, I'm a type A OCD planner, so I had always originally wanted to have a baby when I was 30. And you know, we moved when we were 20, we turned 28 that first year we were over there. So kind of like timing wise, it was kind of like, well, this might be an option, but initially my husband was much more into that idea than I was, especially from a financial perspective, because it's free to give birth in Germany and it's thousands of dollars to give birth in the US.
Yep.
And I was open to the idea at first, but you know, I was like, well, I want to go to Paris and be able to drink. You know, that was of course my first you know, I want to travel around and not have a year of our life abroad suspended. But the more we got into it and the more travel we did, we started talking about it more. And a lot of our friends were having babies and saying how, you know, it took 6 months, 3 months, a year, miscarriages. So like all of these things. And then we started talking about it and thinking, well, what if it takes a while, you know, doing that math game and, you know, all of that stuff. And then we just decided, you know, well, let's just see what happens. And the next month I got a positive pregnancy test.
Of course, whenever you plan for it to take a while,
yep,
the universe has different ideas.
Yep. We make plans and God laughs.
Yep. So what was that like? What was that whole event like for you guys?
Man, well, my specific story is funny because I took the test and I was going to Paris on a girls' trip with like 6 of my girlfriends. And so yeah, that morning I took it and couldn't tell anybody because my husband was in Japan for a work trip. And yeah, so I had to keep it to myself for 3 days and told him when I got back from Paris. So
how hard was that?
It was really hard because I I didn't want to be lame because I really did feel sick
Mm.
and be like, oh, I'm not going to go out, like, going out to dinner and then not drinking. And I was kind of lucky because I was really sick the week before, like a head cold. And like, that was kind of my sign, like something's going on here. Um, and so they knew that I wasn't feeling well. So I had that on my side to be like, no, I just was taking so much cough medicine this week. I don't want to mix it or, whatever, some lame excuse.
I'm quote unquote on antibiotics, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, and then yeah, calling the doctor, and I had a doctor already, an OBGYN that I found through the consulate website. If anybody is moving abroad, you can check your consulate's website and they have a list of doctors who have either studied in the US or taken courses in the US, or they've worked on a military base. Like they need to qualify to get on this list. And they are known to speak English. So that's how I found my doctor ahead of time.
That's an awesome tip. I've never heard of that
Yes.
before.
Yes. Yeah, I had no idea. My OBGYN in Michigan told me that. I jokingly was like, I'm moving to Germany. Do you know anybody over there? And she was like, check the consulate website.
She's like,
So
oh, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They have all kinds too, like dentists and pediatricians, dermatologists, all
Huh.
a huge list. Yeah.
Now, you said you got an OBGYN. Is that like the traditional German model of care out there, or are they more midwife oriented?
So they are midwife oriented, but only in the birth and afterbirth process.
Okay.
Your pregnancy care is done by a doctor, and then delivery, if you have a normal delivery, is done by a midwife. Normal, I guess I should say, like vaginal is done
Low
by
risk or whatever.
exactly, is done by a midwife traditionally. And then Germany has a culture or a system set up. They call them Hebammas, and Hebammas literally translates to midwife. And they're a midwife who will come to your home every day for the 2.5 weeks post delivery and check on you. They check the baby's weight, they help you with breastfeeding, check the belly button, answer any questions that you might have, which is really nice. Unfortunately, because our insurance was international insurance, it didn't cover it.
Oh,
So
I was gonna
we
say that was like a dream postpartum setup.
yes, it would have been very nice, but of course, and they get like women take their pregnancy test and they call a hey mama. They don't tell their husband. Like it's the first call they make because there's not enough of them for the number of women who are pregnant.
Okay.
Yeah. But, all of our colleagues were like, what do you mean you don't have a hey mama? And we were like, well, we don't have that in this US. Like you just go home with your baby and like bid you adieu. And they were like, well, what are you going to do? I don't know. We're going to keep him alive. That's
Consult the internet like every other American postpartum.
Exactly.
Mommy
My
groups.
my mom came for 2 weeks after, like a week and a half after he was born. So we had a hey mama. It was my mom.
Exactly. You had a hey mama.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
So, in terms of your pregnancy, how did that all go? What was like
Yeah.
what's their setup out there, and what was your experience?
I will say that my experience was great. It actually varied from a lot of my friends in Germany who had babies, so I can only speak to my specific doctor. But we had the same as the US. Like I think I had 5 appointments, throughout the pregnancy, did the diabetes test and all that kind of stuff. A cool thing that Germany does is you get an ultrasound at every appointment, which I know you only get like 2 or 3 in the US. So I had 2 extra, quote unquote. A cool thing that Germany does, I think they do the same in Sweden. It's a little book called a Mutterpass, which is a mother book.
Okay.
And they keep track of all of your, your blood pressure, your weight, your medical stats throughout your pregnancies in a book. And you have to carry it with you at all times so that, God forbid, something happens and you have to go to a hospital, you have it with you. It's got your blood type and the your vaccination history, all that stuff in there, which I thought was really, really great because I didn't even know my blood type until they told me at 30 years old.
Yeah, that actually is really a smart idea.
Yeah, that was really, really great. Yeah, I mean, it was great for me. You go to the doctor, you had an ultrasound, they tell you all the things. I did find that my doctor and his partner weren't very descriptive. Like they were just kind of like, everything looks good. There's the baby's brain and the baby's, heart, lungs, back, and everything looks good. Oh, okay. Thanks.
Did you expect a little bit more or different from the care that they provided?
I think, I expected what you would see in the movies in the US or, my friends being like, they walked through everything. They're like, here are your baby's eyes and the nose. And, oh, they're not in the best position to get a picture. Let's try again. That kind of stuff. My experience was like, well, he's not in a great position, so I'm not going to take a picture during the ultrasound.
Oh, that's a bummer.
I never got a very good ultrasound picture, but or like little flippant remarks like they tested me to see if I was vaccinated against rubella, and I wasn't, even though I had the vaccine as a kid. And they were like, oh, did I tell you you're not vaccinated against rubella? And I was like, what? Like if they, just like, oh, by the way, I'm cooking salmon for dinner. Very not a big deal comment. And it was like, well, what do I do? What should I get it? Should I get the vaccine? Should I not? And they're like, well, you can't get it because you're pregnant. Just, avoid a kid who's coughing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll do that. But all was fine. I think it was a lot of information I had to ask first, if that makes sense. Like it wasn't, okay, your next appointment, we're going to go over this, and this is when your diabetes test is. And I had to be like, and when do we do that? And they're like, oh yeah, we should probably schedule that for next week. Very, very low key, like everything's fine, which in the long run I appreciated. But they were very good. I ended up getting some kind of stomach bug or something. We went to Italy on vacation and my mom got sick, my husband got sick. I didn't get sick while we were there, but then on the way home, flying home, I just could not stop throwing up. And we called the doctor and they were like, if it's been longer than 12 hours, you need to come in because you're dehydrated and we have to get you, for the baby. And I ended up being in the hospital for 3 days because they weren't satisfied with my levels of hydration. Like I had too much sugar in my system. So I really appreciate that because I think in the US they would have just been like, just come in every day and we'll give you a drip.
Yeah.
For 3 days. And they were like, no, we have to make sure that you're okay. Now, it was May and there's no air conditioning in German hospitals. I mean, it did work out too because it ended up being the hospital where I gave birth. So I felt like I knew my way around a little bit. But
how funny though that they wouldn't have AC. Like of all the places that would have a climate control, I would think the hospital would be
Nope.
Huh.
Yeah.
You mentioned that your mom was with you. Did she visit you often, or did family visit you often during your pregnancy?
They did, or just even our 3 years while we were there. my family came once a year, and then they ended up coming 3 times during the pregnancy baby time. And then my husband's family came in December, and my son was born at the beginning of October of that
Okay.
year. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, that must
And
have been so nice to like have, those, family and friends and whatnot being able to come
yes,
out during such a like transformative
it,
time period of life.
definitely. And it was, yeah, it was very nice. And it was the first grandchild on my side of the family. So my mom was hell bent on coming at least twice.
Oh.
Yes.
Did you guys do any childbirth classes over there?
We did not do a childbirth class because it was all in German. And while we knew enough German, we were like, this is too important to not fully understand. So, but we did end up finding a birth childbirth type class on YouTube that it was actually Canadian, I think.
I
But
watched the same one. Is it the 3-part series?
yes.
Yes, I watched the same one. I'm gonna link those
Oh,
into the show notes
oh,
because I found those to be super helpful.
I did too. I did too. We did go so you can choose your hospital in Germany. And also, fun fact that many hospitals can turn you away if there are um, too many people. So
Okay.
you have to go and have a backup just in case. So, for example, we lived in a city called Ludwigsburg, and if we decided we wanted to give birth in a town over called Bietigheim, if they were full and we were not residents of Bietigheim, we would be the first ones to get turned away.
Hmm.
So that was interesting. We were lucky though because the doctor that I went to was one of the 7 doctors affiliated with this one hospital. So I remember I asked them, like, can you turn me away? And they were like, we've only had to do that like once in 10 years. Like,
Oh,
no, we will
good.
not turn you away. And so we did the info nights at the 2 hospitals just to make sure, where they go over, the stay and when to come and like your options for giving birth, because Germany is not anti epidural, but they strongly want you to try other things like a water, getting in the bathtub and walking around. So they walked through all of that during those meetings. And you could also schedule a time with one of the midwives or Hebammas at the hospital to pre register. So we could fill out all of our paperwork ahead of time. And so we wouldn't have to do that when we came time to deliver, which is very helpful.
Did you guys have a birth plan in mind before you went into it?
Not really. My birth plan was get the baby out
Right.
whatever way possible. I was pretty not adamant, but I was pretty sure I wanted the epidural, which the acronym in Germany is a PDA, funnily enough. And some hospitals required you to sign a form ahead of time, like during when you filled out your registration paperwork. That's where you would sign that you wanted a PDA, because they wanted to know you for sure wanted one and not you were in distress during labor, so you decided to have one. Like you weren't in a good state of mind for this medical decision to happen.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
would they have like in that situation, would they have like tried to postpone
say
it
no. I don't know, because our hospital, I asked that question. They're like, no, you can sign it that day. So I don't, yeah, there are horror stories maybe of that happening. I had friends though who signed their epidural forms ahead of time because their doctor was like, if you want it, I need to know now and not while you're in labor.
Oh, that's crazy. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. Which when we get to the birth part, there's a good epidural story. When we get
Oh, lovely.
yes.
Well, and to that end then, do you want to just go into the days leading up to when you did finally go into labor and how that all went down?
Sure. So I actually, my water broke 3 weeks early, or like 20, I was 30, exactly 37 weeks pregnant. And yeah, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I went to the bathroom and then I came out and was like, am I still going to the bathroom? And then I went back and I was like, no, this is not what that is. And I walked back into the room and just said, uh-oh. And my husband was like, what? And then, yeah, so we called the emergency number at our hospital, which was Clinic Charlottenhaus in Stuttgart, Germany. And luckily, the Hebamme spoke English. I think there were 10 Hebammas or midwives, and 9 spoke English fluently. So we lucked out there. Because, those times of panic, you're like, I can't think in another language. Can you just speak English right now?
Yep, I know that.
She said, I said, well, I think my water just broke. And she's like, well, are you in pain? Or do you have contractions? And I said, no. And she said, well, you can come now if you want, or you can try to get some sleep and come around 7:30 or 8 in the morning. And so I was like, I knew I didn't want to be in the hospital. I wanted to be in the hospital the least amount of time that I could. So I didn't get any sleep. Of course, I was Googling like what it feels like and when your water breaks the whole time, and what happens when your water breaks, all that kind of stuff. And then we got in the car, we drove. We lived about a half-hour drive away from Stuttgart, where the hospital was. So we drove down with our dog, dropped our dog off with a friend, and went to the hospital. And there wasn't like a big check-in. They sent us to the delivery area, and we knocked on this door. A nurse came in and opened the door, and then she checked my fluid and was like, yep, this is amniotic fluid. You're in labor. And they hooked me up to the machine for 30 minutes to track my contractions. And then after that was over, after the 30 minutes, she said, okay, go downstairs, like check in, we'll get you your room, come back in an hour and a half. So we just kind of went downstairs, filled out our paperwork. Another thing about German hospitals is that you're not guaranteed a private room. You could share a room with another woman in labor or who just gave birth. But again, because we were expats, we had private insurance. So with private insurance at this hospital, we automatically got a private room.
Wait, so 2 women who are in labor could be in the same room together?
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. Oh man. Okay.
Yep. Or 2 women who just gave birth. Yeah.
Is that like, and I don't know if you would actually know the answer to this, but is that normal for out there, or is it just because things are really impacted in the hospitals right now?
I mean, I knew 3 other women who gave birth over there, and they also had private insurance, but were on local contracts. So they had to fight to get the private room. Like they would talk to one nurse and they would say, yeah, we can get you a private room. But another nurse had promised it to another couple. So yeah, I don't know if it was just the area where we lived. But I mean, when I was in the hospital in May before, when I was dehydrated, I did not have a private room. So women were coming in and out. One, had just had a baby, with her husband, like the most magical moment of your life. And you had a partition, but yeah,
but still,
it was that stay in May was like, no, we are getting that private room. I don't care what we have to do to get it.
I don't want to sidetrack, but I do have a question though. Is is the insurance situation out there such that you can either have like this public option, socialist insurance, or you can
Yep.
pay for private? Is that how it is?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
There's the
Okay.
the universal insurance that everybody, is legally required to have. Or you can opt through your company to get private insurance, but it's all paid by you.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So,
anyway, so you've gone down and you've checked in.
yes, we've checked in. We got our private room, which was actually very nice. But even though it was a private room, I still shared a toilet with another private room. So it was like a Jack and Jill type room. I had my own sink, but not my own toilet. Still, yeah. But this hospital was used during World War II. It was definitely old. Not been updated in quite some time. And we called our parents and we were like, yep, this is happening. And then, an hour and a half went by and we walked back to the, I think it was the Kreishalle is the German word. So the delivery area, which were 3 rooms, delivery rooms, 1 room with a big bathtub if you wanted to do it a water bath birth, and 2 bathrooms, and that was it. And so they hooked me back up. They checked my contractions a couple of times for another half hour, and then it was okay, come back in another half hour. She said, go take a walk. And I said, outside? And she's like, yeah. So it was the beginning of October. It was a nice fall day. So yeah, we're just walking around Stuttgart in labor. I think I was only 2 centimeters. This went on till about, from 8 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was just keep coming back. And then I wasn't progressing. So they had to give me the Pitocin to kick it up a notch, which was fine. And then it was like, oh man, this is happening. I think I went from 2 to 5 centimeters in an hour. And they said, if you want the epidural, now's your chance. So in comes the anesthesiologist and her nurse, neither of whom speak English. So this is when it got interesting, because they were speaking to me in German and I understood 80% of what they were telling me, but they just couldn't get the needle in my back. And they just kept telling me to sit wie eine Banana, which means sit like a banana.
Okay.
And the nurse was holding down my shoulders, because as people know, you're contracting at the same time that you're trying to get this epidural in. And finally, after 45 minutes, the midwife who was there said, move over 2 centimeters. And the second I did that, the epidural went in. So it was 45 minutes of trying to get, and I didn't realize that was not normal until I asked some of my friends in the States, well, how long did it take for you to get your epidural? And they're like 2 minutes. Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, and you were having Pitocin contractions throughout all of that.
Uh-huh.
How did you cope? Was your husband allowed to stay in the room with you, or did they make
He
him
was.
leave?
They asked him if he wanted to leave, and he said no. And they kind of looked at him, and I said to him, just stand in front of me, because I knew it was going down behind me. So don't look. And he ended up, it took essentially 3 people to get the epidural, 3 medical people to get the epidural in, because one was holding my legs, one was holding my arms, and the anesthesiologist was poking my back. But I don't know. It was just, I went to a separate place, just breathe and just don't think about it.
Oh
So
my gosh, that just must have been such a gnarly
yeah,
experience.
it was gnarly. And then when it finally happened, the anesthesiologist came back in with Google Translator up and said, "Do you feel like this?" And it said, "Do your legs feel like this?" And it was furry, translated to furry. And I was like, "Yes, that is exactly how my legs feel."
Oh.
So,
Now, I have a question. What kind of epidural do they give in Germany? Is it like the walking epidural, or were you totally numbed out, catheter, etc.?
yeah, I was not. I did not have a catheter.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I could definitely still feel what was happening, but less so.
Mm.
The As it progressed, I think it got so yeah, when did I get timeline? I need to think. They started the actual Pitocin at 7 p.m. and I got my epidural at 9:39, or like it was in effect at 9:30, and by 10:15 I was shaking and like I can't they told me to get on my side, and then I started shaking because they wanted to get the baby as far down as possible before I started pushing, because I was at that point ready to push, and I just couldn't stop shaking. And they were like, thankfully, my doctor did deliver the baby. Not thankfully, but he did all the deliveries, not only the midwife. So they kept saying the doctor will be here any minute. And I just remember being on my side and looking at my husband like, you need to go find him because I can't be on my side anymore.
So did you go
So
from like 2 to 10 centimeters in just
I
like
went
three
from
hours?
I think I went 3 to 10 in 3 hours. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is insane.
Yeah, it was intense, and it was, they started off slow, but they increased the dosage by like 25 every 15 minutes.
Mm,
So it was fast.
yeah.
It was fast. Yeah, so by 10:15 I was pushing, and our son was born at 11:20. But the weird or interesting part, like they tried a bunch of different positions. It was almost like circuit training for pushing. Like I started off like with um on all fours and like did 3 pushes with the contractions, and then we moved to something else and hanging off the bed and on a ball and holding on to my husband and leaning against the bed before finally pushing like you see on TV.
Just on your back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. But
Yeah.
that's was there a reason why they were having you try all those positions?
I think because my contractions were not strong enough to help me push the baby out. So any pushing was just me physically pushing.
Mhm.
Because what ended up happening, I mean, I will say the doctor and the Hey Mama the midwife were fantastic. It was like they had done this before a million times. They were quiet. They showed no signs of distress whatsoever. But towards the end, the midwife just looked at me and said, "You have to get this baby out now." Just very calmly, like, on this push, the baby has to come out. And I remember the next day telling my husband, like, my rib hurts. Like on my left side, like the top of my rib cage hurt. And he said that's because the doctor pushed the baby out. Like he took his fist and pushed at the top of my rib cage on my last push to get the baby out because nothing was strong enough to help push him out.
No kidding. And that was with the Pitocin
Yeah.
still going?
Yeah. Yep.
Huh.
Yeah. So it
Did
was
they ever
it
explain
was
the
wild.
urgency? Were they saying it was something with like the heart rate or?
They didn't tell me anything, but my husband said that our son's head was coming out, but then when I stopped pushing, it was going back in. Which, yeah, I don't know if that's why. Like they had to use the suction
Aha, okay.
head to get him out.
Mm.
So yeah, he was in there pretty good.
But
And I should say I'm a small person. Like I'm 5'2". I was like I had weighed 149 pounds giving birth at delivery day. So I'm not super wide in the hips anyway. So I think, I mean, he was a small baby. He was 6 pounds, 8 ounces. So he wasn't huge.
Abnormally big or whatever.
Right, right. But yeah.
But he was totally healthy and such?
Yeah. Yeah. He was totally healthy. He had a little bit of jaundice, but that's about it.
What was it like
Yeah.
immediately post-delivery there? Did they, like, what are their procedures in Germany?
They put him on my chest right away. They let my husband cut the cord, and they let us kind of be for, it felt like 2 minutes or 30 seconds, but I think it was more like 5 minutes. And let us just kind of be. And then within the same room, like they weighed him, did all of that, cleaned him up. I had some tearing, so I got stitched up. And yeah, then we were probably in the delivery room for an hour after.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were transferred to our private recovery room.
And how long were you allowed to stay there for?
Typical stay is 3 days. We had to stay an additional day because he had dropped weight and he wasn't gaining it quickly enough. So they wanted to stay and just make sure my milk was coming in properly to feed him. I should say one interesting fact that we found at the German hospitals we went to: the men do not stay overnight.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same here in Sweden. Like we go off to like a private room here, but there is no space for the dad to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Which I've always thought is so strange because I don't know if it's the same in Germany, but here, Sweden really does like a solid in trying to make sure that the dad has equal rights and equal access and that kind of thing. Like they really promote the father's relationship. So I found it very strange that they take me to a room with a single hospital bed for me to sleep in and a little cot for the baby if I want to put the baby aside, and there's nothing for my husband.
Yep. It's the same.
It's so weird.
It is. And if we wanted to have him stay, we would have to pay, I think it was 99 euros a night for him to stay. Yeah. Which they explained it like, well, we want the men to get as much rest as they can. And, it's a good time for the mothers to bond. And which at first, before it was happening, it was like, that's annoying. That sucks that you can't be there. But then in looking back, the nurses were fantastic. I pushed this button and they would take the baby the first day and change his diaper and let me sleep. And if I pressed the button every time it was time to feed, and they would watch me breastfeed and give me tips for that. And so I think for me, it was a really good experience because it was stressful, like, and it was kind of nice. Not that, my husband's great, but it was like, if I was dealing with not really knowing breastfeeding and having him watching and like feeling that stress of like, I'm doing it wrong for not only me and the baby, but disappointing my husband in that way too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah.
Not that he would think that or anything, but in those crazy hormone times, and then
there's
sure
pressure to perform,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally get that.
It was nice to just kind of have us figure it out. And of course, he came in the morning, he stayed as late as he could. He brought dinner because the food there is not great in the hospital. I mean, literally dinner one night was a huge square of feta cheese with some pesto and olives and a piece of bread.
Hashtag hospital food.
Right. Right. And there was no, store like in the US, like you can go and get a pre-made salad for $17, but you just pay it because it's there. Or a Starbucks in the hospital. It was not like that at all. There was a vending machine and that was it.
It's almost like a universal truth that no matter where you are in the world, hospital food just is not good.
True. Very, very true. Very true.
So now you said that your insurance did not cover the Hey Mama postpartum midwife. So you did not partake in that at all?
No.
So what were those like first weeks, months, etc. like being abroad? Now I know you said your parents visited.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. So another thing, they do have a pediatrician come to the hospital to check on the babies before they're sent home. So he was evaluated by a pediatrician before we left, which made me feel good. And then we called our pediatrician. Another interesting thing, like in the US, you call a pediatrician and you have like a free meeting, like a meet and greet with pediatricians. You can find one that you like. They don't do that in Germany. Like I called one pediatrician and said like, well, how do I schedule his first appointment? And they were like, well, call us like 4 days after he's born. And that was it. Like, okay. Yeah. So I called them, like they said, like, I think I ended up waiting 3 days and called them and told them we don't have a Hey Mama, and was like, I just wanted him to get checked out like a week and a half or 2 weeks after birth just to make sure he was gaining weight, because that was a concern for us. So we did go to the doctor earlier than other German babies because they have a Hey Mama coming and checking the weight. And then they say, if he's not gaining enough, you should go to the pediatrician, or he's doing great. So we just skipped that step and went straight to the pediatrician.
Yeah, that's definitely like a gap in care for sure.
Yeah. It was, I bought on Amazon a baby scale. So we were monitoring it, and, he ended up being fine in Germany. He was definitely not gaining weight at a significant rate, but he was gaining enough. So that was good.
Is all of the pediatric care for babies born in Germany free?
Yes. To my knowledge, because our private insurance, it ended up working out that, we'd get a bill, and if it was under a certain dollar amount, I think it was like $500 or something, like we would pay it, but then get reimbursed by the insurance company 100%.
Okay.
So it's kind of all medical bills came to us, which was interesting. But I have noticed that medical care in general is much less expensive in Germany. Like I think total to give birth in Germany was 2,500 euros.
Yeah, that's not much at all comparatively. No.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I was actually looking at stats earlier today comparing the cost of childbirth across countries, and the cost of it in the US is easily double than the next most expensive country. It's pretty shocking. And it's the same amount of care and procedures and drugs and stuff like that.
It is. I mean, I know a C-section is astronomical in the US.
Yes, and it is.
But yeah.
So now your son was born in October of last
2018.
Year? And in that time, you have moved back to the US, correct?
Yes. We flew to the US with a 3-month and 2-week-old baby.
Oh my
and
gosh.
A dog. And a dog. Mm-hmm.
And you thought moving to Germany with just a dog was hard, right?
Yes, this was crazy hard, but in a way it worked to our advantage because he's a super flexible kid. Like he had slept 6 places in a month and was totally fine. The unfortunate part which I got mastitis the day before we flew home from Germany.
Oh my
So
gosh, what was that flight like
yeah,
then for you?
it was luckily that the day before was worse because I literally was breastfeeding him and had to hand him to my husband because I thought I was going to faint.
Yeah.
It was horrific. The flight wasn't too bad. He did have his own seat. So he was in his car seat. Like we had the middle row of three. So he was in the middle in the car seat, which was a godsend. And I would tell anybody to do that. And he was 3 months old. So he was either eating or sleeping, thankfully.
Right.
But yeah, the mastitis was not great. And then long story, I ended up my supply tanked, and by the time we got here, he went to the pediatrician and he had only gained like 12 ounces in a month or so, which or maybe 2 months, so that he ended up having to go to the hospital here because he was underweight and fell off the growth chart. And so he's had a perfectly fine healthy life with a couple of setbacks.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm starting to learn that that's just how it is with kids, and they bounce
Yep.
back. They're so
Oh
resilient.
yeah.
Like with my first child, same issues, the jaundice, the weight loss. I had a lot of milk supply
Yeah.
issues. But
Yeah.
she is massive and she's
Yep.
healthy, and
Yep.
it feels like the end of
Yep.
the world when you're in it, especially when it's your first kid. I don't know if you felt the same way.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Like, oh,
Oh
my
yeah, I
body's
felt like a
failing my kid.
failure. Yep.
Exactly. Yep. And then it's like,
Yep.
and then they're eating Cheerios off of the floor, and you're just like,
Ouch.
okay.
Yep. Yep. You have to, laugh about it because he's fine now, of course, which makes it funny in a way. Like, you know, we'll look back and be like, okay, you were so tiny. We were all worried about you, and now you're 6'2", getting a football scholarship somewhere.
Exactly.
Whatever,
Exactly. Yeah. Like things I wish I could have gone into the future and seen so that when I went
Oh,
back to my crazy postpartum first time mom brain in a foreign country, I could have been like, yeah, maybe I could just relax and take it down a couple notches.
mhm, mhm. I
Yeah.
do think doing it all at once, moving internationally and being a first time parent, I wouldn't suggest that to anybody. Um, but it did um, chill me out, I think. I moving abroad in general, taught me don't have expectations because you're going to think getting your mail delivered is no big deal. But actually, in Germany, they can leave your package at your neighbor, even though you're home. Like things that seem very simple are not. So to just kind of go
Go
with
with the
the
flow.
flow, yeah, and just know that things are going to happen and it's all how you react to them. So moving abroad made me a better mom person because I was so like it has to go right ahead of our move.
Well, and especially if
And I
you identify as like a type A control freak, which
yeah,
I do as well, like that is not conducive to motherhood at all.
very
And I
true.
know you know that.
Very, very true.
'Cause-
Yes,
yeah.
I do. Yeah,
So,
being
yeah.
pregnant, I was like, this is either going to make me a lot worse or a lot better. And thankfully, it made me calm down a little bit because, of course, you worry about everything. Like, it all works out. And as long as you take the steps necessary, if there is a problem, it all works
It's
out
all
in the
fine.
end.
Yep. Now,
Hmm.
I feel like I know the answer to this question, but was there ever any discussion between you and your husband about staying in Germany, or were you set on just that 3-year contract and then coming back?
There, so was there a discussion? Yes. Um, I was pretty adamant about going home after the 3 years, especially with the baby, because, it's really hard. Even we live in Michigan and my family lives in Georgia, his family lives in Wisconsin, and that's really hard. So I can't imagine having the baby and being an ocean away, you know. He wanted to stay because the work was really good, our life was really good, but in the end we were ready to come home.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think.
little tough when both of the partners are foreign. Like,
Yes,
neither of you is German. Neither of you has
right,
family in Germany. It's like you're
right.
kind of out here alone. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm. But
yeah, that,
we had a great, I look back on those 3 years, which seem like forever ago, but literally we've only been back here for 10 months, which is crazy. But it's just, we had the best time. It was great for us as individuals. It was great for, our marriage, because I think moving abroad as a married couple can either make or break you.
mhm,
And because you only have each other. And if
yep,
you can't rely on that person, you find out real quick, I can't rely on you.
yep,
And we were, lucky enough to realize we can depend on each other and don't want to have to depend on anybody else. It was really, really good. And when could you ever be 28 with no care in the world and be like, oh, it's the weekend, let's go to Switzerland
yeah,
and
right?
get there in 3 hours. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I should mention I blogged about all of this at roomforgelato.com, like
I'll
about
put a
life.
link in the show notes. Mhm.
Thanks. About life abroad, because yeah, like people reach out to me on Instagram all the time and they're like, I'm moving abroad and thank you so much, because I don't know what to expect. And because I didn't have that either. And same thing with your podcast. I didn't know what to expect besides asking, the two people I knew who had given birth in Germany. But what if I didn't know those people? What if they had kids 10 years ago? So I
Right.
think it's really important for these resources to know that things are different, but at the end of the day, we all have our babies and they're healthy. Doctors want to do whatever they can to make sure you have a healthy pregnancy and birth and baby.
Yeah, exactly.
It might not be,
Exactly.
ideal, or it might be different. Did I kind of love going and walking outside on a beautiful fall day while having contractions? Kind of. It was kind of awesome to not be, hooked up to a monitor and only being allowed to walk on the floor, in a hospital gown. I was wearing my own clothes and until I got my epidural, pretty
Mm.
much. So different, but great.
So on that note,
Hmm.
so say you're talking to someone in sort of your same situation, they're in Germany, they're an expat, they're going to be giving birth, or perhaps just to anyone in general in a foreign country. What advice might you have to give them to help make it easier, more seamless, etc.? Like what would you tell them?
Oh, oh, I think it was good for me to kind of follow the guidelines of the US or your home country and then kind of ask those questions to your doctor. I found in general that a lot of information isn't presented. You have to ask. They want to tell you, doctors, anybody, they want to give you the information and it's readily there, but you do have to ask and being your own advocate, I think, because, no one's going to look out for you like you,
Yep.
whatever
Oh,
that
that's
is.
so true.
Yeah, I think the thing that helped me the most was accepting that it's different, but the outcome is the same. And I think another thing that really helped me was I really did like my doctor. So I think finding that doctor, or really understanding the process. I mean, was it uncomfortable for me to call and schedule this appointment to have a one-on-one with an administrator at the hospital? Yeah. Was it beneficial? Absolutely. Like to get that one-on-one time, I think finding the resource to get that, because if you're in a new country and you're in a big group, for example, like you don't want to be the one in the group and being like, sorry, I don't really speak German, but I'm going to attempt this
Mm,
in German. And, you get nervous. So trying to find one-on-one time, I think
yeah.
is big.
And you also had that awesome suggestion of going to the consulate website and seeing if
Yes,
there's a
that's,
list of recommended
yeah,
providers, because that's
yes,
super helpful.
yeah. Um, I think another piece of advice that someone did give me who had done the same move abroad thing is like, don't be afraid to feel stupid, because you will. And the sooner you get over it, the better. because you don't know if you don't know. You don't know what you until you ask or know for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And assuming things or not wanting to ask those questions, that is what actually gets you in trouble. So,
true. Very true.
Yeah.
Very. Yeah. I mean, my experience was great. I can't say. I think it helped that I didn't know any differently since it was my first time.
Right.
But yeah.
How has your repatriation process gone? Because I've heard from expats that have only even been abroad like a year or two that when they go home, they realize that they've changed in a way where they don't really know where they belong anymore.
Yeah. I can compare to this. Your freshman year of college, and then you come home for Thanksgiving break and you're with all your high school friends. And it's like it was, but it's different. It's like that.
So now you had mentioned your Instagram as a way people were contacting you. Is that the best way if someone wanted to reach out, if they had questions or whatever?
They could do that. My Instagram handle is Room for Gelato, or my email is roomforgelato@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Okay, and I'll put a little note of that in the show notes in case anyone has any kind of questions to come at you with.
Yeah.
So that's the end of Jessica's story today. And Jessica, I just wanted to thank you one more time for sitting down and sharing with us your experiences in Germany. I really hope that your advice and your perspectives are useful to those that are listening. And as I say at the end of all of my episodes, if you have any experience with pregnancy or birth or seeking fertility treatments abroad or have a interesting postpartum abroad story to share, you can either find me on Instagram at the Birth Abroad Podcast, or you can shoot me an email at thebirthabroadpodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, I will bring you guys a new episode next week.